Ms. Amreen Khan. The session will also witness the book launch of Ms. Puri's book, Swallowing the Sun. Another interesting, engaging session coming your way. I would request the members of the audience to please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, our next session, Swallowing the Sun, Ambassador Lakshmi Puri in conversation with Ms. Amreen Khan. And the session will also witness the Central India launch of Ms. Puri's book, Swallowing the Sun. And to launch the book, I now invite Ambassadors Anil and Deepa Wadhwa on the stage. Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, Ambassador Deepa Wadhwa, Ms. Gargi Rawat, and Mr. Raghav Chandra for the Central India launch of Ms. Lakshmi Puri's book, Swallowing the Sun. And historian Dr. Alka Pandey. The book being released by historian Dr. Alka Pandey, art historian Alka Pandey, Ambassadors Anil and Deepa Wadhwa, Ms. Gargi Rawat and Mr. Raghav Chandra. Of remembering and storytelling. Through the eyes of its feisty young heroine Malati, the novel recreates one of the most tumultuous periods in modern Indian history, the struggle for independence. Swallowing the Sun is an epic feat of remembering and storytelling. Through the eyes of its feisty young heroine Malati, the novel recreates one of the most tumultuous periods in modern Indian history, the struggle for independence. Malati's steeliness and fearlessness enables her to defy the constricting patriarchal traditions of her time and take on all those who try to cow her down. We will know more about the book in the upcoming session. Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, the youngest entrant into the Indian Foreign Service, had an illustrious career spanning multiple domains. After representing India abroad in key bilateral and multilateral diplomatic assignments for 28 years, including serving as ambassador to Hungary and Bosnia-Herzegovina, she transitioned to the United Nations, where she worked for 15 years in various leadership roles. She served as director of the flagship International Trade Division of UNCTAD, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, and the founding Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, contributing to the United Nations initiatives on peace and security, sustainable development, climate change, human rights, and humanitarian action. A recipient of the prestigious Eleanor Roosevelt Prize for Human Rights, amongst other honors, she is also a distinguished fellow of the Indian Association of International Studies and a visiting professor at the South Asian University in New Delhi. Additionally, Ms. Puri is the author of the critically acclaimed national bestseller, Swallowing the Sun. Mrs. Puri's maternal side has a long association with Madhya Pradesh. Her maternal grandfather, who is celebrated in her novel, settled down and founded villages in Guna, and her mother's eldest sister's family was in the Gwalior Maratha kingdom and also a minister in the Sindhya cabinet. Her own mother studied in Indore in Ahilya Ashram, which is celebrated in the novel as well. She talks about that in the novel. So she has many connections to central India, and Madhya Pradesh is her Matrabhumi, if we may say so. Ms. Amreen Khan is a media marketing and communications expert and an adjunct professor of media studies at the MCRC, Jamia Millia Islamia, and Jindal Global University. Presently, she's the communications head for the Indian Express. Her personal passion is to promote Indian art and culture through curated events. Ms. Khan is also a marketing advisor to the Taj Hotels. Let's welcome our guests with a loud round of applause, please. I would request the ladies to begin the session.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and many on your behalf and on behalf of Madhya Pradesh, I extend a lot of love. She's already shared your connections with Madhya Pradesh. Extend a lot of love and many, many congratulations for the big launch of Swallowing the Sun. And friends, this book has... So I must confess that when the book got launched in Delhi, we were the last ones in the room and we were looking for seats. So it was in a hotel, and we almost managed 1.5 seats between me and my husband because there were so many people. And I haven't seen that passion for people attending her her talk and her book launches, her interactions on her book, what she's written, with the same absolute madness. She's come just yesterday from Jaipur Lit Fest, and it was a huge success. We watched it on YouTube. And here we are. So Madhya Pradesh is very close to your heart, as what we did. I didn't know so much. I did little research, but I didn't know so much. But now, from your side, I would want to ask you, why does it hold such great relevance in your heart?
Well, good evening, namaskar, sat sri akal, and adab to Bhopal. Vande Madhya Bharat, Mande Madhya Pradesh. It is really very, very emotional for me to be here in Madhya Pradesh and in Bhopal for this literature festival. Because as was said, what I was going to say has already been said, that my ancestry is in this place. And as my dear friend Malashri Lal has said in a beautiful poem, may you honor your ancestors whose genes sleep deep within you. Those who fought for freedom and kinship, for little women, and I would add men such as you. So that is the beauty of this moment, the poignancy of this moment. So thank you so much, Raghav, for giving me this opportunity and for this beautiful, this great literature festival that you are organizing. And it's so important because this is the heart of India, and my heart is in this India, this central India. मेरे दिल में बैठा हुआ है और बसता है. So you know how important this is for me.
It's always nice when we start anything and everything with emotions, and you can see and you can feel it. Yes. Ms. Puri, Ambassador Lakshmi, I would like to ask you, the book has traveled. I don't know if you've You've tracked. These are a few reviews of the book, which as the book has been reviewed not only in India but internationally. Thought we'll just share a short presentation with you all. How do you feel with this superb, extraordinary success of the book across the borders? Ladies and gentlemen, let me just share that the book has, how many print runs we've done? It's close to
Seven at least.
Seven, and all across India, overseas, at Harvard, at the UN, at the UN headquarters, and so on and so forth. It's just traveled everywhere. And it's absolutely marvelous. Congratulations one more time.
Thank you.
And now I want to ask you, how does it feel to travel with your new baby?
You're right, because when I launched the book, my first creative that I shared was holding the book in my hand, and somebody said, you know, that's very womanly of you to be holding that baby and saying, oh, this is my newborn. And I felt that same emotion like holding my firstborn Hermione in my hand. So no, it was, you know, the agony of holding a story within you for decades that wanted to be told, that was unique. And I had not managed to do that. So that agony was unbearable. And then once I had told that story, the ecstasy was also unmatched. So yes, it has been an ecstatic journey in so many ways, and I have been very fortunate that readers have loved it of all ages, young and senior citizens like me. You know, somebody introduced me as the youngest entrant to the Foreign Service, but perhaps I'm the oldest entrant to the literary world. So, you know, it has been really reinventing myself, but it's through this book also telling a story that needed to be told at this time and age. And at this time of India's life, where this has so much resonance. It's historical fiction, and I think, you know, many people said, oh, historical fiction is not so attractive to people, but I think it has been disproved because it really deals, as was introduced, it deals with an era which is tumultuous, transformative, and so fascinating, and so much you can learn from that. Because I always say that in, you know, history is so important. And history does not happen to other people in other ages. It happens to us every day, and we can learn from what happened in the past. So, and also to guide our future. So I think that point, I think the other charm that many people, many readers, now I keep getting feedback, is this coming of age story of, and the women's empowerment story of Malti. Malti has become a darling of the readers, and the way she, you know, evolves just as the nation evolves, is something that has, I think, really won the hearts of people. How bold she is, how she just, you know, takes on the world, and also she seizes the opportunities as they come her way. And then also extricates opportunities, you know. And then there is this, the epic love story that this book is, and also the freedom struggle, and how young people at that time engaged, the ordinary young people engaged with it, and that wonderful era. So I wanted to memorialize that, and that has been, I think people have taken to that.
So usually the old saying that swallowing the sun, you know, look at the cover of the book. So it's so beautiful, and then we say that don't judge the book by its cover, but some of us have, and some of us would also. It's so beautiful, but it'll be great to know and understand what is the journey of this book. How did you conceive this book? How many years you were thinking about putting it together? And then, because your style is quite unique, it's very powerful, and it's quite original. So it'll be great to hear from you. How did this title, Swallowing the Sun, happen? It's quite poetic, as some of the, especially the American writers and some faculty of the leading universities globally have commented, it's a very lyrical book. So I think right from the birth of the idea to how the whole product came into shape, take us through the journey of that, and also the themes that, you know, different themes. We'll talk about it later, but I think it'd be great to bring a context.
Sure. No, this book is a tribute, as I mentioned, to my parents. And it is, but it's not a biography, and I want to clarify that. It's fiction. And I chose that deliberately because, you know, you can, firstly, truth is stranger than fiction, but you need fiction to bring out, to make it believable, as they say, and to bring out the truth, because sometimes biographies, you have to hide the truth, conceal the truth. So I thought fiction is the best way to convey the potency of their lives, how they were iconoclasts for that era. And as I said, that era itself. So it is that motivation, and that's how some of the outline, I would say, of the book came from their lives. And then there was the title that you have asked about. The title came from my fascination, and in some ways I've said in my author's note, my obsession with this 13th century Marathi poet and saint, woman saint, a teenage saint, Muktabai. Her 41 verses, but one of them is this one, which talks about the possibility of miracles happening if you keep faith, if you dare, and if you persist. And that anything can be done. You can break boundaries, you can achieve the impossible, what seems impossible. So this surreal poem of hers became the epigraph of this novel. So if I can just perhaps recite, shall I do it in
Absolutely.
Marathi and English, or just English perhaps?
Both.
मुंगी उडाली आकाशी, तिने गिळले सूर्याशी, थोर नवलव झाला, वांसपुत्र प्रसवला, विंचू पाताळासी जाय, शेष माथा बंदी पाय, माशी व्याली, घार झाली, देखूनी मुक्ताई हसली. The ant flies into the sky. She swallows the sun. Another miracle. A barren woman gives birth to a son. The scorpion burrows down to the nether realms. The snake king Shesha bows down at its feet. The housefly begets a hawk. Muktabai sees all. Muktabai laughs. So many of the themes of this book, free will, human free will versus destiny. How much of it is determined, our destiny is determined by free will? How much of it we are in the hands of the grand puppeteer? So there are many of these questions. There are other themes of Ardhanarishwar. Even at the individual level, whatever we try to achieve in our relationships, in our careers, or even at the national level, you know, what was being attempted at that time, and later I hope I will be able to read passages, how that is applied to the national level. It seemed so impossible at that time, in the 1920s, that we will get independence in 1947. But because people dared, they kept faith, they endured, sacrificed, we got there. So that's the big theme of this book across.
Is there any line that joins these multiple genre of themes together?
So that's, I mean, there are several passages. There's one. So there is this. Yeah. So there is this. So one of the major themes is the interlinking of personal histories of my characters with their engagement in the national movement and how the national movement progresses. And in that, there are different steps. First, it begins with the theater of resistance, where they stage a play called Satye Che Gulam, Enslaved by Power. And it is a patriotic play of Mama Varerkar, one of the great playwrights of that time. And then around that they mobilize, they have these Satye Che Gulam cells, which then support the Satyagraha movement. Later, these young people also participate in various Satyagraha activities, including this very, celebrated Yusuf Ali-led Simon Commission protest. So, and then later Malti becomes, after she becomes a lawyer, she defends freedom fighters. So all of that trajectory about how women and men, like them, the unsung heroes, participated in the freedom movement and how they interacted with the greats, the national leaders of that time. So in one incident, Malti goes to meet Mahatma Gandhi because in law college where she's studying, Professor Hamill has given them a task to do, a dissertation. At that time, there was this, they were talking about Lord Irwin was the viceroy, who had of course said that India will be ready for freedom, independence in 600 years. But he was the viceroy, and they were, in response to all the, the protests, they were putting together some reform, administrative reform, and devolution of power and all of that. But, so this young lady has been tasked to provide a roadmap to accelerated independence of India. So she goes to meet Mahatma Gandhi, and after she meets him, and he of course says that it's all in the intention. If the intentions are pure, then you will be able to find what will take you to that destination. But if our rulers are not wanting to give it, then we will not be able to make it even in 600 years. So this is what Malti says as she leaves Mahatma Gandhi's presence. As Malti left the presence of Mahatma Gandhi, she felt she had seen in him the miracle-making Muktabai scorpion. He, with his 8 stick legs, moving swiftly all over the land of Bharat and beyond. The 2 magnetic pincers of his thought, grasping the unformed minds of masses of the Indian people. His 10 eyes, seeing the past, present, and future. His narrow, segmented tail, held up in a magnificent curve over his tiny body and stinging all with the tincture of protest and defiance. So it courses through the veins of every Indian. He was slowly but surely burrowing down to the nether world of the British Raj. Soon, the British Shesh Snake King would bow his head unfurled before the scorpion of a Mahatma.
I have, how much of your training as a diplomat comes into your writing? What kind of discipline have you imbibed in your writing?
Well, I think, I don't know whether it's diplomat, but it's also upbringing. I think I come from a very literary home. My father was a poet, playwright, first and foremost, before he became a lawyer, and then gave up everything to be a lawyer. But our home was always in Sanskrit. I mean, they would speak in poetry. Their talk was literary. And my mother too. And whether it was Greek mythology or, our epics, I've drawn so much from that atmosphere that I grew up in. So that is one. And the discipline, of course, comes from being 43 years in both diplomacy and the discipline of having to, having a routine. So when I finally got down to, I started writing this when I was ambassador in Budapest 20 years ago. And I only completed it, I resumed it. I wrote 100 pages and left it there, and then I only resumed it during COVID time. So I claim no special discipline. It was during COVID times that, many people were unable to go within themselves and do projects that they would not, like I got up every morning thinking I have to finish this before I die, because those days we were getting up during COVID years, we were getting up in the morning not knowing whether we'll live another day. So it was that urgency which made me finish this book, because as I said, this was something very important to me. Yes, that's
Really inspiring. um, there's one interview I was watching of Salman Rushdie that he gave to the BBC. And he said something very interesting. And he said, so this reporter in particular, I won't mention the name, but asked that, there are lots of very good thinkers, but they may not be very good writers. How have you managed to do the two? You have probably, I think, from all the reading and research that I've done, I think you're the first ever a Marathi, a Marathi, I would say, or a writer, in English, who's managed to put the Marathi historical context, with beautifully with the mythology and also in a very poetic manner. How did you put everything together? So Salman Rushdie's response to that question, which I'll tell you now, he said, one was that, and second, what I shared, and second thing that he said was, it's the relationship you have with the English language. So it'll be great
Yes.
to hear that what is
Yes.
your relationship
Yes.
with the language, and how
Yes.
have you put these
Yes.
three things together
Right.
to produce a product like this?
No, again, I go back to my parents. They were also lovers of English literature. And of course, I think our generation grew up reading the classics, the English classics as much as Hindi. I have a good grounding in Hindi. And Marathi, my father made sure that we would get all the magazines, that we would read Marathi books, and and every evening he would sing us one poem from his book of poetry that he had. So that's how, the cover you have the poem of Bal Kavi, all the greats. So I grew up in that, and many people have asked me, after that you have wandered around the world, and then you've come back to your roots. Yes, I have come back to my roots. And I wanted to, really bring out the beauty, the depth, the richness of one of the greatest cultural scenes of our country, which is Marathi. And I wanted to bring it to the rest of India because, there is so much ignorance, I would say, about each other's vernacular and, each other's regional cultures. So I wanted to bring it to the rest of India through the medium of English, but also to the world. And yes, it is being regarded as the first novel in English to do that, to bring out the beauty of and the depth of the Marathi culture, literature, music. There is all of that. And if you permit me, I think we could do with a little bit of reading. So, apart from the play I referred to earlier, Mama Varerkar's play, there was this great tradition of Natya Sangeet in Maharashtra. And Bal Gandharva was, the celestial singer, was one of its leading lights. So there is a chapter, or there are a few chapters on how young Malti and her friends managed to get smuggled into one of his plays where he is acting the part of a middle class, very docile middle class wife, long suffering wife of an alcoholic who never gives up on him. And after that, of course, they meet Bal Gandharva, and he announces that this is now, from now on, the shows are going to be open to women as well. But let me read to you also this concept of Ardhanarishwar, which I have tried to also bring out and highlight in the novel. So let me read the passage about Bal Gandharva. The fervent contest between the half woman and half man, incarnated in the fused being of the Ardhanarishwar, enthralled Malti and Kamla from the very first scene when Bal Gandharva appeared as Sindhu, a middle-class housewife. His muscular body, wide with the graceful flow of his Maheshwari cotton sari, with its reversible bugdi border. So Maheshwari rings a bell, doesn't it? Its padar casually flung across his wide shoulders. This even as he delicately twisted its edge with a demure, sideways glance at an uncaring husband. Then he goes on, and they go on to talk about how he expresses the heartache, Sindhu's heartache. His powdered pale face caught Sindhu's sorrow. His cheeks nevertheless bloomed with the rouge of rapturous suffering. His painted lips parted in both pain and song. The crystalline pools of his skull-lined eyes beseeched pitifully, even as the kumku dot on his forehead confessed to Sindhu's lifelong bondage and marriage, come what may. The wig with a round bun ensured that the irrepressible fuzz on his face and assertive thick eyebrows had no chance of betraying his masculinity and dominance. His deep, powerful voice sounded incongruous sometimes when he spoke for the meek Sindhu, but when he sang her songs of hope, he believably sublimated them into celestial notes.
I'm sure the audience would like to hear you read a passage or read something in Marathi. Would you like to choose your pick?
The
Something,
poetry?
the poet, maybe poetry a little later, but anything else.
Highlighting the...
Any, yes.
Well, I want to also perhaps talk about the fact that there's so much of Madhya Pradesh in the book. So perhaps I read something about Shivpuri. So there is this character who is one of my favorite creations. You know, I always say, you ask me how this book came about. The book is so much about memories. It's an act of reclaiming, reclamation, reclaiming your memories. But it's also epiphanies and dreams. And so an act of creation, act of reclamation. And some of these characters came to me as epiphanies. You suddenly get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm going to create this character. And also, I'm going to take her here, I'm going to take her there. That is the fun of of playing God when you write a novel. So this character of Sarla is a wonderful character. By the way, all the women characters, most of the women characters are outlaw women, as Toni Morrison calls them, or they are also the phenomenal women. They break boundaries, the Muktabai's aunts, all. So she's one of them, this young girl, the daughter of the minister from the first wife. And so she's always in this mode of wanting to prove herself to do something extraordinary. So one of the things she gets to do is to learn riding and hunting. So she goes hunting to the forests of Shivpuri, and this is how I compare this to how Malti sees the forests of Ratnagiri and then compares them to Shivpuri. Shivpuri's one devta was, by contrast, casually spread-eagled with trees and shrubs sprouting like tufts of hair on his chest and arms, creating enough enclosures and canopies for the wildlife to hide, but ample, open, well-lit spaces for the hunters too, to seek them out. The not-so-tall, bent legs of forested hills, cupped grassy fields. The one devta wore swirling robes and shades of green, from the palest of pale to the deepest of deep, speckled artfully in bursts of yellow, orange, red, and purple flowers. The rich array of trees in the Shivpuri forests amazed them. And then they go on to talk about all that. And then she says, they wrangled with the hunters, bent on cutting through their thickets to squiggle pathways and clearings, prepare stakeouts, or penetrate the abodes of their animal friends. So this is Shivpuri.
Moving to the core, the real essence of the book, which is the character of Malti. And you are someone who I've heard, not only at the book discussions, but someone who practices, who encourage women for empowerment and women to be courageous and bold. At the same time, not losing out on their femininity. So I want to ask you, then when we talk about women power, when we talk about Nari Shakti, how did you centralize the theme around Malti, the iconic figure? And how, from that character of Malti, would you inspire young women? There's so many youngsters and they pay so much attention, not only here but across the borders.
Yeah.
What is your message for young women inspired by your character? We'd love you to recite, to read a passage for that.
Okay. So yes, I think this is at its heart an ode to Nari Shakti. And Malti is a personification of that. But so are some of the other characters who dare to break boundaries. And even in some cases like Sarla, it ends in tragedy. But mostly it is about triumph and redemption. So I think it's a very big message to young people. 100 years ago, these young women, they escaped child marriage and child motherhood. They went out into an orphanage comes boarding school, studied there, and then were the first graduates of Elphinstone College. Again, imagine just a few girls, some 6 girls in a whole university, British professors, other men, how to negotiate that space. And there are many conversations here which young men and women should read about how they, that curiosity about each other, because they have not been young men and women in those days never engaged with each other except in relationship in kinship. If you were sisters or brothers or fathers or daughters, but this was something new. So you will find it very fascinating how that generation of young people, Western educating, but also very aware of their civilizational, civilizational glory and heritage, and also of, really reveling in the cultural efflorescence that was happening, how they engage with each other, how they romance with each other, but also how they find themselves, their identity, in relation to each other, but also in the larger context, with reference to the state, because they were living in a colonial era. So all of that comes out in the book. And there is also the other aspect that women can do anything, can be anyone. That's the other big message that comes out of here. And it is for them to make the choices, and they should be enabled to make those choices. So that's the other big message. And you will see that at one point she sacrifices her law studies to support her lover and goes. And then again, imagine again, almost 100 years ago, for a young woman to go to Banaras, teach at Banaras Hindu University, and then support, be the breadwinner for her lover and later the husband. So, that whole span. And then for her, earlier she has this landlord called Mohan Kaka, who is actually a closet revolutionary. And she discovers that later. He has been arrested during the 1940s after the Quit India movement. And he's been accused of revolutionary acts. So she goes there as a lawyer, and she jokes with him. She had said, you had said that you didn't think that women can do anything in the freedom movement. But then do you want me to represent you? So he said, well, I don't, my case is very bad because I am guilty for what I've been accused of, sedition. But I believe in you. So then she fights his case, and it is one of the swallowing the sun moments for her. So the swallowing the sun moment is what all of you young women and men, and I would say that for Indian men and women, and there is an anthem that she, whenever she's held back, she goes back to, and that anthem is मी ईश्वरांच्या जगत्कारणाच्या खरे हे तुझी पूर्णता मंगळ बोला हवे ते मला काय त्याचे पुरे जाणतो मीच माझे बळ माझे बळ माझे बळ. So what? So it's a beautiful poem of B.V. Tilak, And in that, the idea is that am I not complete and auspicious? You know, in many cultures here, and this distortion of our culture, in a country where women are uniquely deified, you know, they are goddesses. Our main goddesses are women. And this is also another thing that Baba does, Malti's father does. Tells them that they can be goddesses, the three goddesses. Alka is here and she has been talking, Alka Pandey, she's written about the three Devis. So the Devi principle, if you believe in, how can you not believe in the equality of women and men? So this poem talks about, and that's the essence of feminism as well, equal humanity of men and women. So this poem says, am I not complete and auspicious? The purpose of God's creation felicitous. It matters not to me what is your opinion. I well know my own strength, my dominion.
The book has come on its own and it's been taken beautifully for all of you all have the flavor of the book now. And, and you read the reviews, which are so diverse. The book also explores different facets, from love to bravery and valor, and also to a large extent, the struggle to fight for the freedom. It'll be nice to hear how does that fit into the journey of the book.
Well, I think the freedom movement, as I said to one of the interviewers, is both the setting and the character, and a character in the book in so many ways. And it was, as I said, the time was so, you know, there are moments when you think when a country is in the throes, or people are in the throes of a crisis, a continuing crisis, and they are oppressed, and yet those moments may be the most fertile in terms of reinventing and reimagining yourself and your society and your country. And this is what I wanted to capture. The young people at that time did just that. You know, they used the Western ideas to fight the oppressors. They fought for racial equality. They fought for justice. They fought for freedom. And that was something that I wanted to also bring, because I feel that, and I think many of us in the Indian Foreign Service have been votaries of that whilst the territorial decolonization has happened and the political decolonization has happened to some extent, we still need to decolonize economically and culturally, and to assert what it is to be an Indian. So the idea of India, you know, the young people then reimagined the idea of India, or imagined the idea of India from the civilizational one of Bharatvarsh. You know, because remember how many states we were at that time. And then finally they were, you know, like Muktabai said, the miracle happened, and, you know, and Sardar Patel happened, and it all they got united. But so this is what the freedom movement's significance is. In the novel, it provides a backdrop, but also a pivot for action. And they're using that rekindled pride and cultural soul force, you know, to then mobilize and reimagine.
Um, so my personal favorite part of the book is the romance and the love and the letters that they write to each other. I'm not going to say more. I'm going to urge her to read and recite one of her favorite ones.
Your favorite,
My favorite ones.
because
I'll keep asking you to, and you have to capture her expressions when she's reciting this one. My favorite.
So, you know, my great treasure is the 148 or so love letters that I found that were exchanged between my parents when my mother was actually in Banaras and my father was still studying and also then later looking for a job in Mumbai. So those letters are so beautiful. They deserve, you know, I wanted to bring in more, but my editor held me back. So they deserve a separate book, and I think that's going to happen too. But they brought out the depth of their relationship. And, you know, in some ways, I felt that letters enabled them to grow their relationship more than if they were together. You know, you get that feeling when you read those letters because they are so expressive, so detailed, and of course, almost one-sided because my father is very, you know, florid and very expresses deep emotion, sensitive, and my mother is very cut and dry in her replies. There are hardly any letters of my mother, actually. Some of them I had to then make myself. So there is this letter which he writes once they have got married. First of all, for a long time they haven't. So it's 7 years it takes for them to get married. And when they do get married, they can't be together because he hasn't yet got a job. And she can't leave her job. So he keeps sending these sometimes sad, sometimes ecstatic, and some dreamy letters. And so this is one of those. The single outcome of sitting and writing this letter at night is that the feeling we are together remains with me the full night through. In my sleep, when I turn, I expect to fall on the shoulder of my cuckoo. Your arms are tightly encircled around my neck, and I'm gently kissing your face and hair and all over 100 times. Your breasts rise and fall. They make me feel guilty that I'm neglecting them. So I pleasurably remove the cause for that jealousy. Then you start laughing.
I said this, I shared this, that she's quite an original. Don't you agree? I don't know if the youngsters still write these kinds of letters to each other.
I wish. You know, this is such a lost art, but it's also a lost life skill. But I hope it's transmitted into your WhatsApp messages and not abbreviated into, you know, 2 letters, U instead of YOU. No, it's so beautiful to have the full run of your thoughts in letters.
And there are many such letters. When they read the book, they'll
Yes,
discover.
Yes.
So many of the critics have called this book that it's like a song. It's lyrical. I want you to add to that and support
So,
why.
well, you know, poetry is something that I have used to also reinforce imaginative landscape to give it that spiritual, that emotional expression which only comes through poetry. So, and I've used English poetry, I've used my original English poetry, then I have also transliterated from Marathi. So those who know Marathi will of course recognize those poems. And then I've used them to mark different milestones in that narrative, but also to express love or patriotic fervor or yearning for a mother lost. So there are many of these moods and emotions that this poetry in this book carries. So let me first begin with the poem. So this is a poem which is a Madhav Julian poem of Marathi, and it's taken from, it's in the book when the two get married. As I said, after a 7-year courtship, and their marriage is not consummated, and it almost did not happen. So on that night, Guru recites a poem about love unfulfilled. So Malti says, but why? So he turns around and says, it's because it's good to remind ourselves, and it increases our joy of reunion, to remind ourselves that this almost did not happen, like in the poem. So the poem is called Sangam Utsuk Doh, the pond eager to meet the ocean. एकत्र गुंफून जीवित धागे, प्रीतीचे नर्तन नाचलो मागे, एकटा उभा मी येथे, भोवती शोधी प्रियते, होऊनी मग्न त्या क्षणी, धावती येती साजणी, देशील नामग कसून खेव, बांधतील वर तोरण देव, बाजत मंगल जंगल गान, कड्यातून खाली लोटून प्राण, होऊनी काशाय रंग, प्रेमाने बेहोश दंग, पावुगे समाधी सागरी अंत, अजून संपेना वैशाख हंत. So just let me read a few lines from the transliteration that I've done. Pulsating with life intertwined, we together flowed, the gift of the dance of love once bestowed. The solitary pond muddied and parched, now I stand, searching for my beloved in this wasteland. And then it goes on, how dazzled with visions of a union sweet and glorious, peacocks dancing on earth in splendor, king frogs singing on streams yonder. In that moment, overcoming with love and with grace, will you run unswerving into my tight embrace? Gods in heaven will festoon welcome arches along, while we, like crazed minstrels, sing an auspicious song, amazed and rendered unconscious by love newborn, throwing ourselves down from the edge to surrender our life force, we earnestly pledge. then we will finally attain our union with the ocean supreme. But alas, ending this cursed season of Vaisak remains but a dream.
My list won't end, so we have to. Yes.
And I
So
think the
yes. So before we
audience-
just open, I would want her to sum up with a very short response, which is that she gave something to the Jaipur Lit Fest when they asked you, why do you write? Now Bhopal Lit Fest would like to know, why do you write?
Okay. Well, I wrote, as I said, to fulfill my honor, my duty to honor my ancestors, as I told you. But also, I write because I wanted to enrich the global garden of English. Many people have asked, why have you not written in Marathi? Why have you not written in Hindi? The answer is, I dream in Marathi and Hindi, both. You know, I love both those languages. I pray in Sanskrit. But the fact is, because of the way my life has turned out and the profession, I've learned to read and write and, think in English. So that's why, but I do want to nativize that world of English literature and this exotica of Marathi culture and Raja Rao said that it's very difficult to convey in a language that is not your own the spirit that is your own. But I think, I was telling this to David, and David said, but who says English is no longer our language or was never our language?
Your publisher.
My publisher, David Davida. So indeed, in some ways, it has become part of one's psyche and being. So I have done this, but it's going to be also out in Marathi by March, in Telugu also. Wow. It's going to come out in March. And Hindi, I've just signed, at the JLF, I signed the contract for the Hindi translation. So that's one. And so I want Indians to read this novel. But also, I wanted, one of the things that many people have noted, critics alike, that, this, you referred to Rushdie earlier. And Rushdie has said very famously that it is not only about empire striking back, but it's about empire writing back. So I hope, and many have noted that I have indeed, through this novel, returned the Western gaze. We always try to judge everything by the metrics of the West. But it is something that we ourselves must set the measure of all things in the world.
The house is open for questions. Feel comfortable. Please identify yourselves and let her know what you do. Shall we begin from here? Here? Anyone? Let's ask one of the young girls first.
We have someone.
Good afternoon, my name is Vineet Nahata. It was a very enriching and enlightening session. I hope the stage is set for production of a movie based on your novel.
Absolutely.
So what are your views about that, ma'am?
I would prefer a web series, and I'm working on it. We are working on it.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
In Jaipur, she signed a contract.
No,
Here
it
she's
is.
yeah.
No, no, I didn't sign for web series yet. No, it is a very dramatic novel in so many ways. And it has 60 chapters. And so, you know, people that I've been talking to, we were thinking, okay, how many seasons and how many episodes can we get out of this novel? And by the way, this is 150,000 words. The original draft was 270,000 words. So I have a lot of material to give for the screenplay as and when it gets to be a web series. But of course, I'm most interested in the book being read, because nothing like the original literary, offering that I want to be appreciated.
Any more questions? So I can ask one question, which I'm desperate to ask her, because from an author, not to the author, but to the ambassador, Lakshmi Puri, we asked this specific question. We had two ambassadors on the stage. I was in conversation with them, and then we had many ambassadors, diplomats in the audiences. I asked them one question, that why you all travel across the world, you acquire traits of being, of being very suave politicians. How come in the world of politics we don't have women diplomats becoming the politicians mostly? It's only one name that comes up, and that is Ms. Meera Kumar, and that is only because of her background. But mostly men take a lead in politics from diplomacy, and not really women.
I can't answer that. I certainly, many people have asked me whether I would like to go into politics. I won't. And perhaps it's too late for me in any case. But no, I think it depends on, it's a matter of choice. Even women who are in politics, it takes a lot of doing to be in politics. And when we were in UN Women, one of the major campaigns that we carried out was to support the voice participation and leadership of women in politics and governance. And it is very important. And just the other day, I gave a C.B. Muthamma lecture, who was our first woman diplomat. She was a wonderful example, a role model for all of us. And she took on the system to get a level playing field for women in the Foreign Service. So, everywhere I have argued why women matter in diplomacy, for example. Even in diplomacy, we don't have enough women, let alone politics. So I can't answer that as to why women in diplomacy don't go into politics. I think it's a choice that they make. I don't think there is any bar to it. I think it's just the choice that they make.
Ma'am, I don't know about the world of politics. We definitely want you in the world of books, and such a charming book that you've written, a book for all ages, and soon a book in all possible languages. So a loud round of applause. Thank you, Ambassador Puri and Ms. Khan, for this very, very engaging and charming session. And I would now request Abhilash Khandekarji, senior journalist and member of the Society for Culture and Environment, to present a token of appreciation, the BLF Memento, BLF 2025 Memento, to Ambassador Puri, Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, the author of Swallowing the Sun, and Ms. Ambareen Khan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the audience, the best audience ever.